I'm glad I wasn't the only one to use this joke then. Yay! So I want to convince you this evening that smaller is, of course, always better, because who wants giant, horrific, coffee-like things when you could have a nice, tiny, little flat whitey thing from your local... No? Okay. No. What about giant, terrifying dogs that are going to attack you with horrifying teeth and things like that? Or what about a nice little dog? Like a miniature Dax. This is mine. She's actually called Ruby. And I didn't even name her. That's her tucked up into bed. I try and slip this into every talk I give now because that reaction, thank you. And who wants giant, terrifying microservice infrastructure things where maybe we could just play with a bit of little Fisher-Price? Anybody? Horrible article, I'm sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. My name's Phil Nash. I'm a developer evangelist for a company called Twilio. Before I start, can I ask who's heard of Twilio at all before? Cool, that's everyone. I'll stop that. No, it's not everyone. If you haven't heard of Twilio, then we are an API basically for communications, for text messaging, video chat, voice, all sorts of things like that, and easy to use into your application. If you want to talk about that, or if you are using Twilio and you want to tell me about what awesome things you're doing with that, please do come and find me afterwards and tell me about that. That'd be great. Otherwise, I'm going to tell you about waiting. I'm not a big fan of waiting for the internet normally, and having just actually only moved to Australia back in October, I'm sure I learned that nobody likes waiting for it, but we just have to here, right? But we can work to fix that, right? And that's where I'm going. I'm pretty passionate about kind of making web performance work, and it's important to me. My only problem is, as a developer evangelist, I don't actually kind of have a large production application to work on. So all I have is my own website. So I'm going to tell you a bit about that right now. This is a Jekyll website, so it's based on Ruby, but it's a statically generated site that is currently hosted on DigitalOcean Droplet, fronted by Nginx, and served out to the world. So it's static. It's pretty quick already. I like to think so anyway. But around over the Christmas and New Year time, I was kind of doing a little bit of work on it, having an investigation with some stuff. I added a service worker to it for all the fancy new JavaScript things, and it now works offline. So if you've seen it once, it will actually load pretty quick. But the first load is still a difficult thing. And so after doing this little bit of work, I then ran Lighthouse, which is a tool that's part of Chrome DevTools now, or you can just install it as a Chrome extension. And it gave me these results, which was like pretty sweet, right? Hundreds across the board, almost across the board. It's 100 on progressive web apps and accessibility and best practices, whatever they are. Thank you, Google. 100 on SEO. I don't know what an extension knows about that, but whatever. A 99 on performance. Just one missing. I wanted that 100. I wanted that 100, and that sent me down a bit of a rabbit hole of trying to get that extra one. I just wanted it to be one more. So I started thinking about stuff, and I landed on GZIP in the end, and compressing content. I thought, this is already static content. It's already being served pretty swiftly by a web server and just going straight to people's devices. There's no server-side stuff here. GZIP is a great thing, right? All browsers pretty much send this header and say, hey, don't send me the whole thing, send me the compressed file. I love that about them. Thank you, browsers. But this is a little bit of my Nginx config that says, we've got GZIP on. But what this actually means is that Nginx is, it's compressing the files that it's sending on the fly, which is cool. It's compressing them, but it's doing it on the fly. And I'm like, I only need to make one more on performance. What if it didn't have to do it on the fly? What if I could do it beforehand? It's a statically generated website. So why not? This is kind of right at the start of the year. I was just like, it's new gem time then. Let's go do something. Because there wasn't anything out there. There wasn't anything that was making GZIP files for Jekyll as far as I could find. So I wrote Jekyll GZIP, which you can go and install if you want to. But this is basically all of the code for it. I don't know if you've ever... Oh, no, sorry. This and the next 2 slides. Still not a lot. And actually, I don't know if you've looked into Jekyll plugins before, but there's a load of good ways of writing them. Every Jekyll plugin just monkey patches internal classes. So I tried not to do that and use the Jekyll hooks kind of thing. And in this case, just at the end of the way, once the site is completely written out, you can get a callback and go and do stuff then. And it's great. You get the site object, and you pass it in. And like I said, there's more to the code. It's fine. You pass it in, and for each site in the each file in the site, each site file, you can compress it, and that's what I did. And this is the last part, using standard library. Ruby standard library includes ZLib, which is just a open and patent-free kind of way of doing gzipping. And this is all you need to do for it. It does a couple of things extra as opposed to just zipping. We set the modified time in the first line inside that block to the same modified time as the original file, which is useful for Nginx apparently. Nginx does not like to serve the GZIP files that have different file names, different modified times to the original file, apparently. It also sets the original file name, and then it just writes everything into the GZIP. Easy, fine. And there's one important other bit in here, which is this little zlib best compression constant. Because zlib works on a scale of 1 to 9, where 1 is no compression and 9 is as much compression as zlib can possibly manage. And so when Nginx is doing it, and when people do it normally, like the default is somewhere in the middle, a trade-off between time and actual performance. At 9, it takes the longest, but does as much work as it can to squeeze it down. And so I have some little results just to try and solidify that in the mind. This is if you have jQuery 3.3.1. If it's unminified, it comes in at about 270K. But if you gzip that in the standard thing, which is probably what Nginx is doing when it's doing that on the fly as well, it comes down to 80,669 bytes. But if you turn that up to 9, 80,268 bytes. That 401 byte saving. And if I got any traffic, that would save me so much bandwidth. But I don't get traffic. But that's not the point, right? It could save you bandwidth. It could save people time. It's probably not the, all right, it's not the best. So Jekyll GZIP is an existing gem. It works, and it does this. That's just jQuery. It could be, and if you have a bigger JavaScript file or a bigger file of other sorts, it will make a tiny difference too. So we can do better than that. But smaller is always better, right? Always. But that got me thinking, right? There's other ways of compressing files. Actually, back in 2013, a team of 2 at Google came up with ZOPFLI. ZOPFLI is quite a cool thing, actually, because it was intended to just make GZIP better. It's better than zlib. It makes things smaller, 3 to 8% smaller than zlib can, but it writes it into the existing GZIP format. It is still readable by everything that can decompress something that's in the GZIP format. So ZOPFLI doesn't come with a decompressor, it just does the compression stuff. Its only problem is it takes 80 times longer than zlib. But it still works with your accept encoding GZIP, and that's cool. So I was like, it's new gem time, obviously. This is like the 3rd day of the year. I'd done one already. I'm like, no, let's keep rolling. So we have Jekyll ZOPFLI, and the rest of the code is all the same, except for you include the ZOPFLI gem, which is just a native extension, a wrap around the native extension to the ZOPFLI C library. And this is why I did a new gem as well, right? I could have put this into the same one, and we could have chosen at the time, but if you just wanted to gzip, then you'd end up with a native extension, and you maybe didn't want that. Jekyll ZOPFLI. Same kind of thing, you just call in deflate, and then you have to call it the GZIP format, as it says up there. It does do deflate as well. And in the jQuery test, it actually comes out at 76,352, another 4K saved. It takes 80 times as long. It's not the point. 4K. I know you're excited about this, I can tell. But can we do better? I mean, smaller is always better, right? But we can do better than that. And so once I'd done both of these, I just adjusted my Nginx to actually stop doing that gzipping on the fly, but just start sending the static files and using the gzip static module, which is not necessarily part of default Nginx, but easy to install. You can just have it look for those .gz files, and they will get served straight away. And so hopefully I'm saving time in Nginx as well. But could it be better than this? Well, thankfully, people at Google continue to work on compressing things better, even further, but they cast off the shackles of the GZIP format and worked on BROTLI. I don't know how, they're named after like German pastries. BROTLI, I think, genuinely just means small bread. But that's it. So they came up with BROTLI. It's its own new compression format. So now if a browser sends you accept encoding BR, you can send it back BROTLI and it will know what to do with that. Of course, when they released this in 2015, no browser was sending accept encoding BROTLI, so nobody really paid it too much attention to the web. It's great if you had control over both ends of what you were compressing and decompressing, but if you're trying to send smaller smaller files over the web, didn't really matter to you. But this is 2018. We can do better than that. In fact, Can I Use tells me that pretty much all the major browsers do now support BROTLI. The reds there are IE, which doesn't even matter anymore, right? And Opera Mini, which never mattered, right? No, I do joke about that. Opera Mini is important, it just supports nothing. So just keep sending it HTML, it's fine. Uncompressed, or probably GZIP. It probably deals with GZIP, right? It's sucked in by the Opera servers anyway. But like the other greens there just mean good stuff, right? And even on the end, that's the Samsung Internet browser for all those people with Samsung Android phones and the other people that installed it from the, anyway. It also only works over HTTPS. Like all the cool things in the web these days, you have to have a secure site for it. So there is that limitation, but like just get a secure site, it's fine. Let's encrypt, it's cool. So it was obviously new gem time. So we ended up with Jekyll BROTLI, which is exactly the same as Jekyll ZOPFLI, with a copy and replace on the word ZOPFLI for BROTLI, and GZ for BR. And that's it. Like, oh, except for one thing, we've got quality 11. But let me just show you, we've got the table of compression. And there's actually, like, there's an Nginx BROTLI extension as well, which can do the on-the-fly stuff, and that probably does it in the middle of its quality process. And so if BROTLI quality 6 gets you down to 75,302 kilobytes, we can do better because the BROTLI engineers decided they could turn it up to 11. They genuinely didn't just stop at 9 types of compression, they have 11 of them. So if you'd set the quality to 11, we actually finally get a quality 67K. We've shaved off 13K from our original compressed version of jQuery, and this can work better across any of your sites, any of your things. So I got pretty excited about this. It's done, right? And so the results were, well, so there was a problem. And so in the little abstract I put together for this talk, I promised a fight with a CDN. I'm not sure they knew it was a fight, but I did, so that's the important thing. They saw a support ticket. So all this time, I had a CDN in front of my site. I've been using Cloudflare. Cloudflare's great, right? It's a free CDN if you're not doing anything particularly complicated, which works really well if you've got a static site. You just put it in front, and it serves your site from many different places all around the world, as close as it can possibly be. But it does some other stuff too, which you don't really have control over. And so actually I went to test the site just to see how my ZOPFLI version was doing before I even went to do the Nginx BROTLI extension. And I popped open DevTools and I discovered it was already been served as BROTLI. I didn't do anything. Because Cloudflare did. This is very nice of them. But this is the fight really is simply that, that they were already doing all this for me. Bastards. In a nice way, right? So what they've done, what Cloudflare do is, when your browser sends the accept encoding header in, they ignore it, they strip it away, they throw it away, and then they just send to your origin server the accept encoding GZIP header. So all my work to make BROTLI work, and it took 3 gems to get there, and I hadn't even done the Nginx work at this point, they only wanted GZIP. So maybe my ZOPFLI work did help, but, you know, by not too much, probably. And that was it. So I crafted a crafted response as a support ticket to say, hey, I know you're stripping this, this header. What I would like you to do is not. And maybe just have my BROTLI content, which is smaller than yours. By a good, I mean, on my HTML, on the front page HTML alone, there was a 2K difference. And I thought that was important enough. And I was just like, can we just can you just not do that? And I'll give you the BROTLI stuff, and then you can do whatever you want and send that back. And they sent me a number of articles, all the same, telling me that they do just send BROTLI for me. And that was my fight. I'm like, no, please, I want you to stop doing that. And they're like, no, but we do. No, but stop. No. What you see is, we do. Eventually, somebody did raise an internal ticket to say, maybe we can look into this for you. But in the meantime, I had to actually strip the CDN away in order to test my BROTLI implementation, and that just showed that having a CDN makes things quicker than making things smaller. So go with the CDN. But, you know, in the takeaways, I did make 3 gems, which you can, if you have a Jekyll site out there, you're willing to use them. It just takes installing the gem to actually make it work on your Jekyll site. It just works in production. If you're thinking this is all very well, but I have a nice Rails application to use, then you should be doing this and probably making up BROTLI things for your static assets, your JavaScript, your CSS, anything that's not going to change. You can make it. So Sprockets will do GZIP with zlib best compression out the box without you doing anything. It will make those files. You can turn that off. Or if you install the ZOPFLI gem and set the assets.gzip to the ZOPFLI symbol, then you can have Sprockets do ZOPFLI for you. And then the only way it seems at the moment to get Sprockets to do BROTLI is to use this Sprockets exporter pack, which makes one exporter the BROTLI exporter. Having written these slides, I now want to go and dig into Sprockets and make a new exporter so we can have BROTLI in this modern age of everybody supporting it. One question, of course, is did I make it any faster at all? And the answer was no, we did not get one more. That is the results from today. I'm still working, I'm still fighting at it. I don't know what I can do better than that, but that's as far as we can get. I hope you agree with me. Smaller definitely is better, regardless of the results, especially if you choose a tiny puppy. That's all I've got for you. My name is Nash. I'm a developer evangelist at Twilio. Thank you so much. Does anybody have a question? One at the back. Yes. Nice.
Just purely for the sake of ego, did you attempt bypassing Cloudflare to see if you could hit 100?
Yeah, no, it's quicker with the CDN. it goes down if I turn off Cloudflare. My next thing is try a new CDN, which allows me to do this. And the only one I've looked into so far is Fastly. And you can do that. You just have to write a complicated rule for their implementation of Varnish that stops them stripping the accept encoding header in exactly the same way. But at least they let you do it, which I appreciate that. So maybe I'll try that at some point.
Please tell us. So you said ZOPFLI, the compression took 80 times as long as standard GZIP, right?
Yeah.
How about BROTLI, and how about decompression on the other end?
So BROTLI is somewhat equivalent. I think it takes more memory and more CPU, but the time is somewhat equivalent to regular zlib compression. And decompression the same. Like they work to try and make it within the same boundaries as GZIP. Of existing GZIP implementations. Can't confuse the compressor with the format, but no, BROTLI kind of works in the same way, and that's why it's also built as a streaming format, so it can be done kind of in that on-the-fly mechanism as well. Although, again, you wouldn't do it at quality 11 on the fly. Somewhere in the middle is best. But if you are worried about that, you can kind of test all the qualities and see which one's kind of speed and not speed. I mean, even when ZOPFLI is 80 times as slow, like when you run it against a full site like that with all the assets and things like that, it doesn't take that long. And if you're doing it, in this particular case, if you're doing it kind of statically before it's being served, then to me, that doesn't necessarily matter how long it takes. That's why I looked into it, and that's why ZOPFLI is, I think, a reasonable thing for a static site like a Jekyll site.
Did you try anything crazy to try and get it to 100, like just deleting all the images?
If I'd got it to 100, I'd have put hundreds across them. And I'd have run around the room.
Anybody else?
Right there.
It's a static site.
Yep.
It's heavily compressed.
Yep.
You got 99.
Yep.
What else do they want?
I know. My worry right now is that I'm not sending any cache headers with the HTML so that the CDN is maybe not caching things. So each time I hit the site, the CDN goes to the origin anyway to check that it's new and serves that. But people don't necessarily recommend setting cache headers on the HTML because that might change. So, and it's going to change. Maybe a short one, but it's not popular enough to keep that going. So right now, maybe it's not worth getting 100. I'll report back next month. Anybody else at all?
Alrighty, thank you, Phil.
Cool, thank you so much.